Hello and welcome to EVE Online. For my past 2 EVE videos, we've focused on Abyssal Deadspace. I gave you a beginner tutorial and showed you how to solo in a worm fit. And now today, I want to go over about 10 really important tips that you need to know for Abyssal Deadspace, especially while flying around in frigates. Some of these have gotten light mentions in my previous videos, but today I wanted to highlight things that wouldn't otherwise be in a regular guide. Let's start with tip number 1. Make a safe, especially in trade hubs. If you are running your filaments outside of a trade hub like Jitta or Dodoxy, you're not going to want to open up your filament right in front of the fucking trade hub. You're going to want to set a location somewhere in space, place a bookmark, and make that your safe spot where you go to open your filaments. That way, people aren't going to know that you're doing them, because when you're in them, the conduit that you went through stays there, and you can see it from outside space, and someone can just sit there and wait for you to come out. They can scan you and then blow you to all hell once your invincibility timer runs out. Placing a safe makes it so that you don't have to worry as much, because people would have to go kinda out of their way to even know that you were running filaments. Tip number 2, do not take the loot that you get from these filaments and then try to auto sell them wherever you so happen to be. Even if you're in Jitta, you will get ripped off, and here's why. First off, filaments aren't exactly the most popular thing that people run. So a lot of the actual filaments that you get in loot don't actually sell for the best price. If you look, you will almost always get a much better price, regardless of where you are, by placing a sell order than trying to auto sell them. There's some things where the margins are close enough that it usually doesn't matter, depending on where you're located, such as condensate, sometimes isogen, but things like filaments, mutoplasmids, and contracts are really going to take some manual price placement to get the best amount of ISK out of. Secondly, and most importantly, there's a type of loot that you get from these filaments known as Triglavian survey databases. These are also known as red loot compared to blue loot that you get from sleepers in other parts of the games. Now, what this general term means is that you can sell this to an NPC, not even a player, an NPC for a set price that is higher than what any player is going to pay for it. In this case, you're going to want to bring these surveys to any Concord stations. Now, any of them works, but they all buy different amounts a day. The best place to go to is definitely Ulai if you're near it. The Concord HQ buys up to 33,333 a day. You will get 100,000 ISK a piece for your databases there. Whereas players will never really buy it from you unless you're selling it at, like, let's say 10% off. And it's worth making the jumps to go sell it, especially if you have it in bulk. This stuff weighs only 1/10 of an M3. So you can stockpile this for days and then bring it over and make a lot of good profit just by not auto selling it where you are. Tip number 3, if you have a ship that can run the cheaper filaments, such as running Firestorm filaments or Dark filaments, and you're confident that you can run them without dying, then fucking go ahead and do it. Those are so much cheaper. I run exotics, and I spend about 900k every time I open a frigate filament. If I was doing the same thing with Firestorms, I'd only be paying like 210k in the same time frame. You can save a lot of money just by doing a different type of filament that everybody else does. So if you want to save money in this way, definitely find a ship fit that works for you for types of filaments that aren't spam run by other people. Of course, don't do this just to save ISK if you're not confident that you can run these filaments as easily as the ones you would otherwise do, because more than likely you're going to lose a lot more money when you lose your ship than you would lose by actually running a more expensive type of filament. If you're having trouble coming up with fits to run Abyssal filaments, go to zKillboard and check the NPC killboard for unstable abyssal depths. This shows the fits of every single person that died because they ran out of time, and you'll find a lot of unique and interesting fits here, and even very practical ones that might help you gain some ideas for your own fits. Obviously, take it with a grain of salt because these guys ran out of time and died, but look at what they have, compare it to what you have, and see if anything looks like a good improvement that you could work towards or work into your own playstyle. If you have industry skills, you can actually make a lot more profit out of running these filaments by keeping the loot that you're getting and the blueprints and actually crafting and then selling the end results, all the ammo, modules, and ships. But do your research into whether or not you're actually going to make a profit out of doing this. Because if your industry skills aren't high enough or you don't have access to a station that has certain buffs, you might end up not making enough for it to really be worth it, or potentially even making less. Another good thing to note is that you don't need to dock and deposit your loot after every time you run one of these filaments. You can actually come out of one, wait for the 1 minute invulnerability timer to wear off, and then drop another one immediately and head back in. This is a little thing, but it can help you save time and thus earn more ISK an hour. Of course, don't just keep doing this if you're worried about dying or something like that, because then if you just die and lose all that loot and your ship, well, you didn't really make anything. When fighting enemies in the Abyss, especially if you're flying in a frigate, especially if you're soloing in a frigate, please do not fly straight at your enemy. Don't just hit the manual orbit button. You're going to want to approach your enemies at an angle so you can get some traversal on them. When fighting turreted enemies, this is really, really important because there's some really high damage Triglavian ships in here that can kill you in a couple seconds flat, even with the most blinged out of frigates, if you fly straight at them. But if you fly at an angle, more often than not, with that afterburner running, they'll miss you constantly and you'll be able to close the distance and kill them. This doesn't matter as much when fighting an enemy that shoots missiles, but it's still better to have an angle on missiles than to fly straight into the face of one. You'll take a little less damage overall. If your DPS is fine enough that you can just kill things while they're following you around, or if you just generally aren't playing in a team so all the AI are staying in range of you anyway, rush the caches if you have good enough range. You don't need to waste time actually sitting around fighting the enemies. You can just rush for the caches while dealing DPS, and then by the time you collect all your loot, the enemies are dead and you can go through the conduit anyway. This is just a little tip to save time while you're in there, because remember, you're on a 20-minute timer and every second counts. Learn what towers and clouds and all the effects of filaments inside filaments do. Do that research, because you can help yourself a lot if you're using turrets by, say, getting near a tracking pylon. You can really fuck yourself over if you're a drone boat and then you fight within an automata suppressor. You can gain the edge you need if you lure some Triglavian enemies into a yellow cloud, but you can also die terribly if you run into a blue cloud. Do the research, because if you do any of this shit inadvertently, it could cost you a lot of time, ISK, and effort. So you'd be better off using it to help you than it be working against you. Learn what the enemies in filaments do. There's a lot of variations to the prefix and the suffix of all their names, dependent also on what type of enemy, be they Seekers, Sleepers, Triglavians, etc. There's a lot of info in just the name, from what damage type they do, to what damage type they're weak to what other effects they might have, like if they can web you or newt you. This is all very important stuff to know. And seeing as you're on a 20-minute timer, and the DPS in these is pretty high, and that the moment you see these enemies, they're going to start rushing you. You don't have time to click every single one of them, click the info button, and read up on them. And those don't tell you if something's going to web you or newt you. So you're going to want to do this research in advance. I'm actually going to make a video on that coming up. so that I can tell you guys what the names do, give you a reference to work with, but definitely do that research. It's so important in filaments. But yeah, that's it for this video. I hope these tips helped you. These are very important core things to get down. A lot of it's a little too much to stuff in the beginner's guide, so hopefully this helped. Again, I'm going to try to get you a little list of all the unit types in Abyssal filaments, and I'll go over them with you and what they do and what to look out for. If you want to see any other type of ETH content, just let me know. I can try to make more tutorials or show off a certain kind of content, but for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.